Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm really sorry about keeping you waiting. We had some technical issues. I am now part of a social experiment where you put a Microsoft employee in front of a Mac. So this is going to be great. My name is Karoline Klever. I work for Microsoft, and I am the product manager of Visual Studio here in Norway. So Visual Studio, that's Visual Studio, the IDE, Visual Studio Team Services, which I was supposed to show you here today, but I'm not going to be able to do that because I don't have my own machine. And TFS, Team Foundation Server, that you probably heard of. But I'm not here to talk about that right now. What I want to talk to you about is mobile DevOps. And I am extremely interested and engaged in how developers are delivering their software projects. How are they making sure that they are able to deliver top-notch quality, whatever app they're delivering? I have a web app developer background, so I'm not a mobile developer. And seeing how mobile developers work, there's one thing that really hits me, and that is you guys have a lot, and girls, of course, sorry, you have a lot more challenges than the typical traditional web developer does. So I want to start out this presentation by talking a bit about what are those challenges, and then, of course, seeing how DevOps can help you overcome those challenges. So this slide, we've all seen before, right? Has anyone not seen this slide or some kind of variation of this slide? OK, good. So I have some new here that I can fill in. Now, this is an overview of device fragmentation. I think the statistics behind this slide is really interesting. I had not actually heard the statistics. I'd seen this slide many, many times. And I thought, OK, it's pretty cool, but so what? But then I heard the statistics, and that's when it really hit me how big of a challenge this really is. This comes from an app called OpenSignal. It's a global app with, sorry, my mic is falling off. It's a global app with 10 million downloads. And what they do is that they publish an annual report on the Android device fragmentation of their users. So this slide is from the report from August 2015. There has not yet been released a report for 2016. But in 2015, as this slide shows, is that there were 24,000 different Android fragmentations within their user base. If we look at the year before, for 2014, they were at around 17,000. So there was a 28% increase within 1 year. Now, I'm pretty sure when they released the report for this year that we're going to see an even bigger increase than we saw last year. That's going to be really interesting. And of course, this does not take into account that there are over 1,300 different manufacturers. It does not take into account the different form factors, different operating systems, different versions of these operating systems. So there are a lot of things that you have to take into consideration when you are delivering mobile apps. I mean, how can you deliver one enterprise app, or several for that matter, and ensure that they are working for all these different devices? That's a huge job. Now, the users of your app, the end users, they don't really care that this is a challenge for you because they have extremely high expectations as to how your app should perform. Your users, they expect you to deliver a top quality 5-star app that works no matter what. There should not be any issues when they're downloading it or installing it or when they're using it for the first time. And if you screw up, you only have one shot. If they are not happy when they try your app, they're not going to use it. They're going to find a different one. They're going to give you a terrible rating. Statistics show that if your app doesn't load within 3 seconds, 60% of the users, they're just going to abandon it. They're not going to spend more time. That's how long you have to impress a user. 3 seconds. Now, of these, 43% of those users, they would never actually return to your app if it didn't load. They wouldn't try again the day after. They would just think, no, not going to go there. I'm going to find something else. So first impressions are key. You have one shot, and you have to make sure that your app works as expected the first time around. And of course, performance. You have to ensure that your mobile applications are performing. And this, coming from a typical web developer world, you can see that the user trends, how your end users are using apps, is quite different from a traditional web application. Because mobile users, they usually have sudden bursts of engagement. Very short. They don't use your app for 2 hours. That's only a few apps that are able to do that. They use your app in short spurts. So that means that your app has to be able to work at a massive user load. Because if these short spurts come at the same time, you have to be able to scale and make sure that your app delivers. And performance really also comes into mind when you take into the rest of what's behind the app. Because there's a front end, yes, that's what the end user sees, but behind the app there is so much more. And the app complexity, as we're seeing it with microservices, cloud services popping up everywhere, is that app complexity is also increasing. We have an example here where this is an app from Alaska Hopper. It has a Samrun front end, but the front end here, that is just the tip of the iceberg. That's a tiny, tiny part of what this application does. The real stuff, that's what's happening behind here. You have an API running in Azure as a backend. You also have a web app that the app interacts with. And then you have the API management, and of course you have a SQL database, most of it running in Azure, some on-prem, so it's a hybrid solution here. But this app complexity, it means that when you release a new version of your app, sometimes you will also have to release new versions of the backend. So here we're kind of getting into what I really love, and that is how do you make sure that you have a working development cycle to enable this, to enable a working app that performs and that's going to wow your users and make sure that they don't go somewhere else instead. So you will have to ensure that you can release that app and that you are in complete control. The release cycles for an app is also a bit different than for traditional app development, because if you have a bug, your users will want that fixed within weeks, maybe even less. If it's a really bad bug, they're going to want it fixed now. They're not going to let you wait for a year or half a year to release that bug. That's unacceptable. They're going to go somewhere else. So you have to make sure that you have fast release cycles. You are able to give them new features. You are able to give them the bug fixes that they need. And this is where the development process comes into mind. So I've been through these 5 challenges. We've been talking about device fragmentation, user expectations, performance, app complexity, and the release cycles. These are challenges that you as app developers face every day. And what's the solution to this? Well, that's the topic of this talk, mobile DevOps. I've already covered the why part. That's why it's crossed out. That's why you need mobile DevOps. What I want to do now is I want to get a bit into the what. What is it, really? I mean, it's so fuzzy. And how can you do it? So I'm going to start out by talking about what is DevOps. And I'm not going to focus on the mobile part. I'm just going to focus on DevOps in general before we move on to mobile. Now, DevOps is the big elephant in the room. It's that thing that everyone is talking about. Everyone can see it and touch it and feel it, but we're not really sure what it is. Everyone wants it. All the developers are talking about it. But no one is really able to define what is DevOps. So someone's going to say, well, DevOps, that's basically a developer and operations, they're talking together. They're communicating. Instead of the development team simply throwing a package over the wall to the operations team, they're now actually speaking. Okay, that's one definition of DevOps. Another one is infrastructure as code. So all your environments, your tests, your staging, your production environments, they should now be defined as templates so that you can check in your infrastructure to version control, and you can automate the deployment of new environments. Awesome. And for some people, that's what DevOps is all about. Others might say that DevOps is just automating everything. You should never do anything manual. If you do something twice, you should automate it. Okay. While others might say that DevOps is feature toggling, feature switches. Your code should always be production ready, and when you want to enable a feature for a user or for a set of beta testers, you simply toggle a switch as a configuration, and it's there. So, and someone might say that, well, maybe it's like Kanban for operations. There are so many different definitions here. And when I try to define this, or when I try to define anything, I usually turn to Forrester, because Forrester usually are quite accurate, and they have a clear view of what the market, what the world looks like. But then I went to Forrester, and I looked at their definition of DevOps, and that was extremely complex. It was just massive. So I wasn't happy with that. But then suddenly on Twitter, I'm a real Twitter addict, and suddenly on Twitter I saw someone quoting one of my colleagues in a tweet from a talk he did, and it just struck me that that's it. He nailed the definition of DevOps, and ever since I saw that tweet, this is the definition I've used. So DevOps is the union of people, processes, and products to enable continuous delivery of value for end users. And what I really like about this is that developers, we usually think about, well, okay, we deliver a new feature, we deliver a bug fix. But that's not really what we're delivering. What we are delivering is value to our end users. And it's so easy to forget that, but if you start delivering features that no one wants, you're not going to exist. Your company is not going to exist 2 years from now. So that's the key here, delivering end value continuously. DevOps is about 3 things. It's mentioned here. It's about people, it's about processes, and it's about the products that you use. You have to start in the right direction. So if you don't have the people and process, it doesn't help that you have the products. So you need to start with the people. You need to ensure that you have a team that actively knows how the development process should work. Where do you have your bottlenecks? How can you make sure that you and each single individual in your team is doing the best they can and the most efficient work that they can? That's where you need to start. When the entire team understands the process and agrees that this is a process that we should try, that's when you can actually start doing the process and improving the process. Because DevOps is not a goal that you achieve. It's something that you continuously work with, but you're never quite there. You will never reach that moment when you say, yes, I'm doing DevOps. That's not going to happen. This is something that you can always improve, no matter how far you get. And when you have those two things, that's when you can start looking at which products are you using. Are you using the products that really are making you efficient? Or are you using products that were efficient when you started, but now that you've advanced and received a process that's working very nicely, maybe those products are no longer the best ones? So what's the effect? If you're able to do this, if you're able to find the process that fits your team to continuously deliver value to your end users, what will the effect be? Well, basically, you will go from a model where you develop your applications, they are feature complete, and then you start testing it and ensuring that it works. That's the gray model you see here. That's the typical quality model that a lot of development projects are doing. The result of this model is that after a lot of testing, you will have to fix all the bugs you found, and you will have to do all the security tests over again, the functional tests, the performance testing, and your release is going to be delayed. The DevOps model, that makes sure that all the testing, all the quality assurance parts are done right from the start, and you will be able to deliver on time and maybe even before planned. So let's get into a bit more specifics. What is our mobile DevOps solution? So now I've been discussing DevOps, and now I want to go into the mobile part. How do we make this process mobile, and what tools do we have to do that? Well, basically, this is what our mobile DevOps solution looks like. Can you see the arrows? There are arrows in this picture, but I think the colors are a bit off here. So I'll try to explain. Basically, this is where you work. This is your IDE, where you write your code. You check in that code to a code repository somewhere, probably a Git repository, GitHub, something like that. Then we have continuous delivery, so as soon as you check in your code, an automated build should be triggered. This builds your code, your unit tests, your integration tests, and ensures that you did not screw anything up with the changes you just committed. Now, after all the tests are run, you could do continuous delivery, and you could release that code immediately, for example, to a test environment. And now we are going down here. That's distribution. So you could, for example, release it to all your beta testers every single time you commit a change. Or if you'd like a bit more control, you could schedule it. Now, in our case, I was going to demo each and every step of this, but since I'm not on my own computer and there are some security things I have to do to log into the tools that I need, I'm not able to demo all of it. So I'll demo the parts that I can, and the rest I'll just have to tell you. So basically, Visual Studio Team Services, in this case, you could have your code repository there. Or you could use, for example, GitHub and have your code live there, and you could just, whenever a commit happens in GitHub, it would trigger a build in Visual Studio Team Services. So Visual Studio Team Services is basically a collaboration tool that takes you through the whole DevOps process. It lets you write the code, build the code, test the code, and deploy the code. we see testing up here. And the testing that we're talking about then is any kind of testing that could be automated. But there are other tools out there that could complement that testing process. And in this case, we're talking about Xamarin Test Cloud. And this I will be able to demo because there are no two-factor authentication things that requires any certificates on my machine. Xamarin Test Cloud is automated UI testing for mobile applications. And this enables you, instead of having a device lab within your company that's quite pricey, and manual testing, of course, takes a lot of time, it will enable you to automate all the UI tests for your app. So these two put together could ensure that whenever you check in code, you have a set of UI tests that are run and ensures that the code you committed didn't mess anything up. So at the bottom here is HockeyApp. Have any of you used HockeyApp? Okay, a lot of people have used HockeyApp. Awesome, okay. So HockeyApp is more about distribution. You could release your app there and have your beta testers download the app, and you can have user metrics on how they're using it, how many downloads, how many users, what's the performance like, are there any crashes? And if there are any crashes, you can have crash reports. So HockeyApp is basically the distribution and the monitoring and the feedback of your mobile applications. So here I was supposed to demo this part, but I'll have to skip it. So I'm going to move on to this demo instead. It's a lot more fun as well. How many of you have used Xamarin Test Cloud? Okay, so a couple of people. It's good. Before I go into the demo, I just want to talk about how we do our testing. How many of you are doing the typical testing down here? Simple unit tests, integration tests. Okay, good. A bit more. And then, of course, we have up here, we have beta testers. We have manual testing. Someone has a physical device, and they sit down, and they try out the app. How many is doing that? I hope everyone should raise their hand right now, unless no one's testing their apps. And the blue dots here, those are types of testing that most people are doing. But there is a lot of UI testing missing out there. A lot of people are still not UI testing. And just to show you how important UI testing is, this graphic, if you were working in the US and you wanted to cover 75% of the US market, you would have to test on 134 devices. So if you're doing manual testing, you would have to buy 100 or rent 134 devices, and then you would have some poor person sitting in a room running through your app at least 134 times. This does not sound very efficient to me. And it actually sounds really expensive as well. So let's take a look at how we can automate this. Instead of buying all these devices and doing the job manually, okay, sorry, it's a Mac. It's not my fault. Okay, let's try. I have a browser somewhere. Is it this one? Oh, yes. Doing good. Thank you. How do I expand? Is that the green one? Yeah? Yeah, nice. It's actually, the usability isn't that bad. Okay. Now, this is Xamarin Test Cloud. So what I've done here is we have an app. It's called My Driving, and it has a set of steps, a set of test criteria or test scripts that it runs through. You can see all these tests right here on the left side. So for example, you can see it's navigating to the current trip, navigating to past trips. So this is basically any action that you could do in your app, any user story that you should go through when you're testing your app. In the main window here, you can see all the devices that we were testing on. So we were testing on 8 devices, and none of them failed. And 12 tests were run in total. Further down here, you can actually see which versions of the operating systems. These are all Android. And you can also see, okay, were there phones or tablets, and what manufacturers. Down at the bottom here, you have the memory usage. So a very nice thing here is that if you release a feature and you see that the performance is drastically changing after you release your app, then this might give you a clue as to why. So what I want to do is I basically want to take a look at all the tests that were run. So let's take a look at these phones. And here we see all the phones that these tests were run on. Where do you think these phones are? Does anyone want to guess? Are they emulators? Virtual machines running in the cloud? No? No, they're not. These are actual physical devices in a warehouse in Denmark. So what happens when you upload your app and you run these tests, your application is downloaded to a set of physical devices in Denmark that runs your application, that runs your tests. And just to make sure, this app is a Xamarin app, but you can do this with any iOS and any Android app. So this is, even though it's called Xamarin Test Cloud, it's not only for Xamarin developed apps. You can also do this for any iOS and any Android app. So for each step along the way here, we're going to see a bit of information. So if I just walk through, you're going to see that the screenshot from every single app, or from every single phone that this was tested on. So we have the screenshots, and we can step through and see how the app is working. We can, of course, zoom in to one of the phones. If you want a full-sized screenshot, you can, of course, have one of those. You can do a playback if you want to. So I click the playback. As you can see here, these are the different steps, these gray lines down here. So if we start this, there's not going to happen much. Oh, yeah, we're in the middle. OK. So here you can have a playback of the entire test. So if you're struggling to find a bug, or if you see that one of the tests failed and you don't really understand why, you have the chance to watch the video. What exactly happened when this test was run? One really cool feature, sorry, can you still hear me? Yeah, OK. One really cool feature down here is the memory usage and the CPU usage. And you can see that the gray line, I'm going to run it again just so you can see. So if I go back to the playback here, you can see that this gray line, it moves along for each step. So if you have a feature or something in your application that makes your performance peak, then you can figure out exactly where in the test, exactly which action is it that ruins your performance, or your memory, or your CPU usage, for that matter. If you do have an issue with your application, we have the device log, and you can also get an access to the error message itself. I'm going to show you that for a test that's actually failing. OK, let's stop this. So if we go over to a different app that actually has some failures, here you can see I didn't do so well this time. All my tests failed for 101 devices. So let's go into the tests and have a look. If you want to know what 101 devices look like, it's a lot. How many of you have a test lab with 101 devices? Yeah, none of you do. In Xamarin Test Cloud, there are 2,400 different devices that you can use to test your applications. So the chances are, if there is a device, it's going to be there. You're going to be able to test it on that device. Now, you can, of course, filter. We can filter by form factor, by manufacturing. And one important thing here that an automated test is not going to be able to show is design bugs. So for example here, if I step through this test, you're going to see here, we have for this Google Nexus, there's a gray line at the bottom. That doesn't really look good, does it? There's no way of automating this kind of errors. There's no way of automating whether this is working as it should. But if we zoom out, okay, we still see, okay, this one has the gray line, but the other ones are fine. So I have no idea what the issue here could be. Maybe, it's a tablet problem. All the tablets have this gray area at the bottom. And it's really easy to figure out exactly what is the common factor that's causing this issue. If we go to one of the tests that is failing, we can step through here. If we just zoom out, we can see if we have any failing tests. So let's go back to everyone. And as the tests start to fail, you're going to see that some of the devices will just be black. So let's see if we have one of those. Okay, something's here, we have one. Okay, so this one failed. This is out of the picture now. If we move along, okay, it's still out. Okay, a bunch more failed. So now we're going to know that, okay, we have a real issue here. When this developer checked in this code, a lot of people are no longer able to sign in. That's pretty bad. So let's take a look at why. That did not have, let's see here. Let's try this one. Here we go. Here we can see we have the device log. So you have access to the entire log of the device that you were testing on, if it's able to load. Okay, that's not loading. We have the test failure. You can see here there's a connection refused, something about a calabash step that's not running as expected. That's why the device failed. And you also have the entire stack trace, if that's what you need. So basically, you have access to all the same information that you would have if you had the physical device. There's a really cool feature coming. I'm not able to say exactly when. The announcement as of now is sometime next year, but there will be a live version of this. That means that you can, if you see that there's an issue with one of the devices, you can live provision that device, and you can do and run your tests on the device live. This is scheduled, so this is typically you start running a test and it runs for some time and you go back and it's finished. But you can then do live UI testing on a provisioned device that's in Denmark. Pretty cool. How am I for time? It seems Max don't have a clock. 5 minutes left, okay.
Back to your presentation? Let's see.
Yeah.
Here.
Thank you.
There.
Thank you. So that's the Xamarin Test Cloud demo. As for HockeyApp, most of you had already tried out HockeyApp, and I'm not going to be able to demo that anyways. So let's skip it. Sorry about all the demos that are lacking here. Are there any questions? Yes.
How do you write the tests that you run in Xamarin Test Lab?
Good question. Now, if you are writing your app in Samrun, there's a UI API that you can use. So you can actually write your UI tests as code. If you don't have a Samrun app, there's a test recorder that you can download. Visual Studio has one, and Samrun Studio that you can use on Macs. It also has a test recorder. So you can basically download any app, and you can run tests on it and upload them to Test Cloud. And one of the things I didn't show is how you create that kind of tests, where you can upload the tests for the app. But you can then also choose what language should the device run. So that will reset the entire, or that will set the locale and the currency and the time formats for that device. So you're also able to specify that. Yeah.
Any other questions? I have a question, actually.
Yes?
This warehouse in Denmark, are there pictures of this?
You know, I really want to go there. I'm talking to the Samrun team every week about the work we do together. And because we don't have a Samrun team in Norway, so the closest we have is in UK. And that's the one thing I'm pestering them about, is when are you going to bring me to Denmark? Because I really want to see this, and I will post pictures. Yeah.
Perfect.
For iOS apps that you run the test on the Xamarin Test Cloud, because they're actual devices, do you have to provision your app with the device identifiers for each of the how many devices that you want to run on?
I'm not able to answer that question, but I can check. If you give me some kind of contact details, then I can get back to you on that. Yeah. But I know that we've been around to quite a lot of customers, showing them Test Cloud. And one of the things that the Samrun guys like to do then is they download the customer's app beforehand, and they sit in the meeting and they ask the customer, so how well is your app tested? And they're like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then they tell, okay, because we ran a lot of tests in Test Cloud, here's the results. And they're usually quite shocked, because although they are testing well, they are testing on these 5 devices and not the 1,000 other ones. And they are able to download those apps and run them and test them without doing any of that. Yeah, so, but I'll double check just to ensure. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much to Karoline.
Thank you.